enjoy. And we have just started recording.
Lovely, thank you. So hi, I'm Simon Oliver, Head of Finance and Workforce Systems. Hopefully the presentation's coming through and working okay. And with me, I've got Apoorv Dami, who has been instrumental in updating the staff survey information for 2023. But if I start with a bit of the backstory, I know Daryl has kind of alluded to him being the instigator. I've put him and Adrian Marr, our Director of Finance, as the instigators of this. So what was the problem? Basically, within EdsNeft, we had no insight or deeper information into the staff survey other than what was shared by the HR team, which was tended to be kind of like largely at trust level. But the Director of Finance and Daryl wanted a better understanding of what was going on at departmental level so that we can try and make some improvements, just understand where perhaps we've got areas of good practice and areas of bad practice. So he set about the challenge to us to kind of, can we make contact with the HR team? Can we get an understanding of the data? Can we produce something? And the detail of the information that's supplied, if anyone's familiar with the staff survey information, basically you cannot get the granular data out in the same way that you'd be able to get the finance information out of the finance system. You can't get the raw data because if there's below 10 people within a department that have responded, they won't give you the information. So basically, it depends how your organisation has submitted the data, but the way we'd set ours up was that we'd given the department level information, we'd set a specialty service up, a service or a CDG, depending how they're set up in your organisations, then division, then trust. So we had multiple levels that we could target down to information. So we had to create a set of reports that would allow that level of information to be drilled down. Now, if you've been through the staff survey, you know it takes a good chunk of time to actually answer all of the questions because you get asked things like, do you like going to work? And the answer is usually always, often, sometimes, rarely, never. And with those sorts of questions, each one of those data sets comes out. So we ended up having to do 200 plus visuals on this report that we did. And that was just for finance. So being finance, what do? We used Excel, of course. So that was our solution. That was our first attempt at it. So we had to go at Excel, mocked it all up, got it working, gave it to Daryl and Adrian, and off they went with it. And being sort of finance people, we could get our head around the numbers, we could see the visuals, we can understand what the story and what it was saying. But what happened next, of course, with all these things, someone else saw what we'd done and wanted to know, could we do similar for their department? And it just snowballed from there. So then the question became, could we replicate what we've done for the entire trust? And bearing in mind EdsNeft, if anyone's not familiar with EdsNeft, we're on the East Coast over in sort of we're basically North Essex and West Suffolk, and not West Suffolk, East Suffolk, get my words right. If there's anyone here from West Suffolk, apologies. We run across 40 sites and we have about 13,000 staff. We are a mixture of community and acute. We do not do mental health. So we had something like 500 departments, all of which would need access to the information. So it's a big organisation. And sort of when we first started doing this, we were still sort of dealing with sort of shared drive mergers and stuff like that. So it was really difficult to cascade things. Chuck into the mix, the data set was over 1 million records, and it all had to be drillable. And the audience, some of them are not particularly great at understanding the data or using Excel. So the solution wasn't Excel for the trust level, and we took an evolution on and we started to use PowerBI to do our tool, because it basically meant it could be shared over the web and no one could break it. I won't go into the pros and cons of PowerBI because I think there's loads of other forums that have done that, but basically Excel was not going to cope with what we had to do. I'm not going to do death by PowerPoint for you now. I'm actually going to kind of take you into what we actually did. If I start with the first tranche, I wasn't joking when I said it was death by graphs on the visuals, but for a finance user, most people could start to get their heads around it. So if I pick on your team effectively, that's where I'm going to go. So this is the finance data. we can see what is going on within a team. So you can see here, I'm going to pick on the first question here. The team I work in has a set of shared objectives, and this is the usual thing. This is probably bringing back flashbacks to people filling in their surveys, but you've got strongly agree, neither agree, and disagree, and strongly disagree. Now, within the survey data sets, if you're not familiar with it, basically this is about as granular as it gets, in the sense of these are the actual results from the raw questions, and you get the responses if more than 10 people have answered at this level. So you then have a tier above this called positive and negative scores, where they'll group the likes of this in the sense of group strongly agree and agree into a positive score. They will ignore the neither agree, and they will then put the disagree and strongly disagree into a negative score. So when you see the positive and negative scores, they don't add up to 100% because they ignore the middle column on these graphs. Took me a little while to get my head around some of this stuff, but it was a familiarization, I can tell you. And sitting above that, they have, I'm going to get the phrasing incorrect here, but they have something called like a people's themes and promises score. And it's basically a score out of 10, where they take all these questions and they come up with sort of like an overall score out of 10 in terms of how positive that section is. There's another level of trying to make sense of the data. It's really quite tricky to get your head around some of the data, but once you get it, you're fine. So what we did here, so this is our first sort of iteration that we did really data level graphs. So we started at the basics in terms of what it did. We then took that information, and the P and N there represents the positive and negative scores, and we then flipped these questions into positive and negative scores. So we're able to flip that over into a positive and negative score. So we can see, if I go to the right page, that would help. We can then see how that question has gone, that the team I work with has shared objectives, and you can see how the positive score has been grouped. We're also been able to map on last year's performance as well. So you can see whether there's been an improvement on here. So on this first question, cost finance, we can see there has been an improvement between years on this specific question. I should also say just sort of familiarization as well. Sorry, I should have said at the start, but you've also got the comparator, which is the rest of the NHS effectively. The ESNEFT average, the red represents the finance team score for the year, and the pinky peachy colour represents the previous year, just so you can kind of see the trends, how we compare against the organisation. It's quite interesting because, to be frank, ESNEFT on most of the questions has scored very, very similar to the national average on most of them. So those two graphs tend to stay very, very sort of close to each other. But finance does tend to sort of outperform a lot of the areas compared to some of the others. Also due to the exceptional leadership of Daryl and Adrian while they're on the call. Well, Adrian's on the call, but that's there. So we do quite well on this type of thing. But when we shared this information with the wider hospital, obviously being a bunch of accountants, we are quite familiar to dealing with data, understanding numbers, understanding visuals, and being able to kind of interpret that and analyze perhaps where we need to look, areas of poor performance that we need to dig into, but other operational managers are not. So this year we took a slight different approach, and I had Paul have the pleasure of working with me. So he's one of our finance graduate trainees. Is that the right phrase?
I mean, yeah, somewhat something like that, yeah.
Something like that. So up until the end of October, Paul had not seen Power BI. So he's been on a bit of an accelerated program in terms of learning and development, and also the whole staff training data set has been a learning curve as well, I think it's safe to say, because it's not the sort of familiar numbers that you're used to seeing. So we then reproduced a new dashboard. If I can get to the top, I've got a nice share. You guys can't see it, but I've got a nice sharing banner up there that's blocking my view. We then had the staff and it's a sort of staff and survey dashboard created. So we've got here sort of a view of the staff, and these are our sort of directors, so we know who they are. We then have a summary insight. Now, I will hasten to add that we literally finished this app last week because the actual innovation was the one you've just seen. This is this year's innovation that's taken it a step further. The summary insights tries to do a little bit digging into the data, in the sense of it highlights perhaps the departments within there that have got the lower scores and the departments that have got the higher scores. So it starts to try and tease some of that information out in plain English. We haven't quite 100% finished this little bit, but it gives good information in the sense there. But the meat of it is within here. So this is the dashboard, and what it tries to articulate on here is we have 7 core themes and 2 local ones with regards to sort of staff engagement and morale, but it quadrants it into the 9 people themes that come out, and these are the scores out of 10 effectively. So it takes all of those questions and they all map into a theme, and then it scores them at 10 effectively. So it starts to give that high level view of where I need to look. So this is one of our clinical divisions. I won't drill into this because there's a limit on what I can share and what I can't share, because this is live data. But it just gives an indication here that we've got the ESNEF score and the ESNEF national score, and how what is selected has performed against both of those metrics. If they are below, I think it's the national score, it will flag red. If it's above the national score, it will flag green. The one I will drill into will be finance. I just left the medicine on there just so you can actually see the colour ragging and stuff. I'm going to dig into We Work Flexibly. So this is finance data for 2023. So this is the current survey that's just been released. If I dig into here, these are actually tiles that we can click into. And it then starts to indicate how we've done. So it starts to give that next level of information down. So in here, this is just a repeat of the first table, so you can see what's there. But within the We Work Flexibly, there's a subset that sits between the questions. So it breaks down the question into flexible working and support for work-life balance, and it gives the finance score. So of the 7.66, it gives the breakdown between these 2 subcategories beneath it.
Okay.
Do not ask me how that number is calculated, because it's just given to us by the survey company. So I'm drawing the line there before there are any questions about that. Down here, we've now got 2 columns. The first indicates the level of the score by department. So where we've picked finance, we know what departments map into it, and where there is above 10 staff that have actually responded, we can now share that information and make that available. So we can see within here which teams score really highly and which teams score really lowly.
Also, we can click on the scores as well.
Yeah, I'll get there.
Yep.
I'm getting told off here. And then down the right-hand side, we have got the departments that are included in the overall score, but because there are below 10 responses, so we've got 5, 4 responses, we can't make that level of information available for that department because of that. So it's just indicating and informing the manager, but yes, these are included in the overall score, but we really can't tell you whether they're happy, unhappy. We have no idea. So it's just to be mindful that whilst we can get information on these departments, there may still be some areas you want to have a look at in here, but we just can't make that information available. So if we clicked on here, so if we can see, so obviously our unhappiest team here seem to be the BI core team. So if I clicked on them, the metrics over here change. So you can see here, this one has now changed to 6.21. We can still see they're still above the national score, but below the ESNEF average, and significantly outlying compared to some of the other departments. But we can see actually on a flexible working perspective, they're really happy with the flexible working arrangements they have. And actually the issue is a support for work-life balance. That's the sort of intelligence we can start to get on there. So we don't need to worry, don't need to worry, always need to worry about flexible working, but actually the main concern within this area is the support for work-life balance. So up the top, we've got the questions that actually map in. I will start with just flexible working, so you can see seems to be only one question for flexible working, which is helpful. But it just gives an indication of whether people are happy with the flexible working. Now, we do work from home a lot as a team, so I'm not surprised we score quite strongly in that one. But work-life balance is obviously where we've got the problem. We can see there that the BI team are clearly indicating that they do not achieve a good balance between their work life and home life. So there is definitely an area of focus when these sort of survey results are taken out to the managers to try and sort of identify what's going on. Now, that's the application. I'm not going to go through every tile because they all work in the same manner, in the sense that you can drill down and you can click into it and you can then start getting the breakdowns of what's going on within there. I'm not going to go through everything because some of this information hasn't even yet been shared with the teams. So that's where we are. That's what we've done with it. Daryl, is it worth sort of saying about some of the actions that have been taken over the last year with regards to finance supporting some of the other departments? I'm just trying to think the work we've done with one clinical division around trying to sort of help with their staff survey results. Because I think the organisation has buddied us up with sort of departments that have performed quite highly were buddied up with departments that hadn't, to see what learning could be done with one of the things that came out of the survey data.
Yeah, I guess what I could add is we take regular health and wellbeing temperature checks, so that's just a local survey, and this information helps to sort of triangulate that information as well. So well, at the moment, the staff are keen for us to do that twice a year, so that means we sort of take stock of people's health and wellbeing 3 times a year. So that's one way in which we get that information and we try and take actions. I mean, part of, I guess, the fact that our flexible working is so flexible is because of the positive responses that we've had to that. We have a few concerns about, well, I personally have a few concerns about the fact that people don't come in enough and the social interaction they get from coming into the office. So that's something that we're trying to work on. From a supporting the rest of the organisation perspective, we were asked to do some work with our maternity and women's, children's and families directorate. So I had a number of meetings with them to sort of explain some of the things that we'd been doing to try and help engagement. Clearly, their operating model is very different from ours, although they have a mixture of community and in hospital staff. So it was just trying to take some of the things that work for us and seeing whether they could apply it to their, I guess, their culture and way of sort of supporting clinical care. So that's a bit of a work in progress, and I probably need to take stock and see whether the survey results have improved for that particular directorate and offer my help again if not.
Yeah, it's one of those things you don't get monthly progress. It's just once a year, and obviously with that, it's how the member of staff feels on the day as well. So sometimes if there's some bad news or something, it can knock it. That's been the journey we've been on, and sort of what we've done with it and how we got to where we were. It all started with an innocuous question from Daryl: Simon, can you put this data in, or can you find where this data comes from, and can you put it in some graphs for us? Has evolved, I think it's safe to say. Are there any questions? I've got stunned silence. Is there anything in the chat? I don't know. Hang on, I didn't see the chat if that was going through at the time. Just that it's been recorded.
Nothing on the chat at the moment.
Andrew?
Oh yeah, thank you. I mean, especially really good presentation and really impressive work that you've done there. So a couple of questions. You've got the 9 tiles that you had with the sort of themes. Is that something that a set of themes that you've come up with, or does that come from the national survey?
It comes from the national survey. I didn't know that either until we started down this path. Because again, I know it's been recorded, but if I'm being quite open about it, I think a few years back, I don't think at the time the HR and the comms team, I think the staff survey fell between 2 stools, and there wasn't really an expert with regards to the data set. So they'd get the standard pack out the survey company, and that was about as deep as the analysis went. Until Daryl piped up and said, Simon, got a problem, can you look? And then it forced us to kind of look at it, and it's kind of exploded a bit from there. But yeah, they are definitely the 9 themes, because I think, is it the one NHS Finance also do a comparator of the finance teams based on those metrics, and that's what drew my attention to it. I didn't even know they existed, having been with the survey company and the HR team. Not one of them mentioned it.
Yeah, that was why I came back on screen, just to sort of make that point, that if you are able to get your data at a finance department level, then you can submit it to the one NHS finance team, And then at the moment, they are using Excel to be able to produce their output data. But yeah, that is available. Simon, I didn't know whether it was worth explaining how replicatable this work is if you've got the right tools and the right skilled people.
Yes, I mean, the original intention, I don't know how complicated, because I can't take any credit to Paul that's done the 2023 one, but it is possible to, if you can export the data and map it into a certain way, that we might be able to lend you our template and people will be able to replicate it, basically, to save reinventing the wheel, because it is just about getting the data structured in a set way, and then you load it in and it should just then be replicatable. Anyone that's interested. So a bit like taking an Excel template, pump it with your own data and away you go, sort of thing. But you need to have a Power BI kind of reporting team effectively able to do this, because it's been built to load from Excel files rather than anything complicated, so it doesn't go from SQL or anything like that.
So I was going to ask about those backing tables. So how many tables do you have behind this?
Three.
There's quite a few, because of the way the data comes out of the survey company, because you can't just take a granular ledger data set and build up every one of those metrics. Needs to be sort of pulled out, mapped, and then loaded. That's the complicated bit, the mapping process.
Yeah, I think we'd be really interested in looking at this.
Yeah, if I put my email address in the chat, you can grab it.
Thank you. Sorry, one thank you and then another question. So thank you, because now I understand that thing about the positive and negative scores. I could never get my head around that, but I do now. Thank you.
Yeah, honestly, it's been a learning curve. Just because it's got a number on it, everybody chucks it finance's way. I don't know if that's the truest same at every hospital, but it seems to be the theme at our place. That literally, if it's got a number on it, it gets slung our way. And but to be fair, it has been a learning curve, that's for sure. But
thank you.
Yeah.
And just as a final question, I mean, how has this been received throughout the trust and with your managers?
Mixed. The first one's been mixed in the sense of with regards to understanding the data set, because suddenly being presented with 200 graphs, yeah, an accountant loves it, but an operational lead, if they love their numbers, they get it and understand it. But if it's someone that doesn't, then they struggle a little bit to get their head around it and sort of tease the stories out. But it has lifted the lid on everything that's going on out there. And as you can see, once that example I sort of gave, you can kind of dig through. And while the theme looks bad, actually, if you dig into it, it's one specific issue. So it's work-life balance. So that's either a significant work pressure or something. And like I say, for that survey result to come out, over 10 staff have responded. So it's not one person saying, I've got a problem. It is a significant chunk of the workforce that's saying there's a problem. So it's more than just sort of that's probably one of the advantages of it being set at 10 staff, that actually when you get a result, it probably needs to be listened to.
So obviously when you take a staff survey, it's people, how they feel when they actually take that survey at that point in time. Yeah, and obviously if the whole team is under pressure because they're working on something big, that might influence, but at the end of the day, you've got to work with the data that you've got. And if you can have open discussions with the team about what those results are saying, then you can either understand it because they were under pressure and things have calmed down, or it's still a problem and you need to discuss about what you do about it. So we do, we have health and wellbeing meetings, and we do encourage the smaller teams, the teams where they can actually see their data, to actually look at it and discuss as a team what they can do to make it better for the staff.
Yeah, I should have said at the outset, I have absolutely nothing to do with the staff survey. So my core role is overseeing health roster, ESR, payroll, financial reporting. It's just that data analytics falls within my sort of remit. So financial data kind of production kind of falls within my remit. So they thought it could be quite a good a good way to do it. So yeah, the staff survey up until nothing completely new to me.
But Simon also forgot mentioning that, not just health rostering and those teams, he's also a good mentor, and because of his good mentoring, I could like achieve this thing. So I feel like because of his guidance and support, I could like, achieve this thing. So really, it's not just me that who has achieved this thing. It's like the work that we do together, because of that, this is a result. This product is a result of team working. Yeah.
Yeah. Thank you. I'm embarrassed now. Right. Okay.
Okay. So has anybody got any other questions that they'd like to raise?
And I have just flashed up on here the one NHS finance dashboard as well. So this has come from, and this scores the finance teams across the country. So they take those scores out of 10 into those 9 categories, and they rank them in terms of the hospitals that you may or may not want to work at. So
I guess
I won't name them on here, but you can see your own. If you see your own on there, I apologise. But
so I guess one important thing, if you come on the call, is find out whether your data is analysed at a finance department level, because not a lot of it is, but not every organisation is. And one of the things that we found out, because we weren't in the one NHS finance data to start off with, and we discovered that it was because our organisation drew the line at corporate. But because we had got into this, so Simon was able to sort of extract the data set and provide it separately. So one NHS Finance will take it automatically if it's available. Otherwise, if you are in a position to be able to sort of dig into that data set, isolate your finance department and then send it to the one NHS Finance team, they can add it in as well. So obviously it's great to get as many organisations in as possible, and then we can get a better feel for how the finance department across the NHS is sort of thinking and feeling at that point in time.
Yeah, it will be variable. Even if you contact HR teams now and there is no data available, it's worth saying they'll be they've got to pull the data set together during sort of late August, and they produce the staff list. I think ours was the 1st of September. So they will have to reissue the 2024 data as at the 1st of September. As part of that submission, they also have to define what data sets they are supplying. So the nationally mandated in the sense of gender and the EDI. They then mandate what they call 2 national breakdowns, which tends to be, they're sort of restricted down. Our survey company had it restricted that we couldn't put more than 24 categories. So we couldn't use department because we've got over 500. So we did it on division, but we split corporate into the actual CDGs or the services. So we had corporate split by finance, HR, where previous years it was just corporate. And we use site as the other one because we run across 40 sites. We picked out the main sites and then just bundled the others to sort of other, just so we can then get a split of whether we've got a happy site and an unhappy site, those sorts of things. We then had up to a further 15 local categories to put whatever we wanted. And that's where we loaded the department, and I think put ward flags. We put all sorts of other things in there just to try and preempt what we might get asked for, so that if we get asked for anything, we can do it. So if your teams are submitting survey data, it might be worth maybe contacting, it will be either the HR or the comms teams that will be submitting this stuff, and asking them what data sets they've supplied already and what data sets they're planning to supply, because it might be they already have done it and the data may well be available. You may just not be aware that it's available. That's probably the sort of thing. And the only other thing, I mean, we're having sort of conversations internally about the organisation structure. So we're having a right punch up between ourselves on this, because we have altered a lot of the corporate codes, particularly, and it's not just corporate, but department codes, to align to things like reference costs and benchmarking returns. So particularly the corporate benchmarking return, where we're having to define accounts payable, accounts receivable, and all of the sub functions need to be listed specifically. And it just makes the corporate benchmarking return really simple. If we've got a cost code called accounts receivable, it maps in. There's no apportionments, nothing needed. But the problem is our accounts receivable team is a team of like 2 or 3 people. So we are never going to get any staff survey results back for them. So we've got this conflict where we may want to have a bigger pool of staff on a cost centre, because again, from financial management, less cost centres, their month ends are easier, that type of thing, versus the corporate benchmarking return versus the survey. So there's all sorts of things, but it has sparked a debate about having a look at the structure of the organisation and around, do we need to perhaps have a minimum number on a cost centre? Do we need to, it's those sorts of debates that need to be had.
But ways of extracting data out of ledgers and then reanalyzing them are a lot simpler now than they would have been when we decided to go into detail on the ledger. So it's just recognizing that things move on. I think the other point Simon didn't mention was that Simon was able to quality assure what had been done previously, and there had been some liberal interpretations of which teams aligned to which departments. So again, Simon was able to use his expertise to make sure that departments were aligned properly and future-proofed as much as we can do that.
Yeah, that's a good point, Darren. Actually, yeah, the first year's worth of data when we looked at it was interesting.
Okay, so don't really want to take up any more of your time. If nobody else has got any questions, I'd like to thank everybody for making the time to join our webinar. I hope you found it interesting and helpful. Simon has put his email address in the chat if you want to sort of follow outside of this. So enjoy the rest of your day, everybody.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
That's
Thanks,
great. Thank
Daryl.
you very much. Cheers.
Thank you.